Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to be here in Toledo, and I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about some of the good work that the state of Ohio is going to be doing over the next few years, and then I'll introduce Governor DeWine. I'm sure Ohio's lakes and waterways represent many of the same things to the people here today that they do for me and for my colleagues in the legislature. They mean life, energy, jobs, tourism, trade, history, culture, and growth. And all of these reasons are reasons why we are committed here today to protecting their health, their long-term viability, not just for us, but for future generations of Ohioans, for our children, for our grandchildren, and beyond. Our waterways mean community. They bring together a diverse group of committed leaders from government, business, academia, conservation, and agriculture to recognize the value of what we share. And they compel us to be mindful stewards of their power, of their possibilities, and of their long-term preservation. During my time in the Ohio Senate, we focused on bringing together these different communities to work on various legislative solutions to address the health concerns related to our water resources. For 3 consecutive General Assemblies, the Senate has introduced as one of its first 2 bills efforts to protect and preserve Lake Erie and our other waterways. In this General Assembly, you see bipartisan legislation in both the House and the Senate related to these subjects, and in particular House Bill 7, Senate Bill 2, and also legislation sponsored by Senator Gavarone. And we've had a number of people over the years who've worked on that, and I'll introduce some of them in a moment. But I don't think he's here today, but I'd be remiss if I did not mention Randy Gardner, who has, over the long term, been one of the greatest friends to Lake Erie that we've seen in the legislature. So we began this year by introducing Senate Bill 2, sponsored by Senators Bob Peterson and Matt Dolan, and Governor DeWine made it clear very early on. And I'll tell you how early on. The very first conversation that I had with Governor DeWine after he won the election, well before he was sworn in, where he said, well, what are the Senate's priorities for this General Assembly? I pointed out that for several General Assemblies in a row, the Ohio Senate had looked at Lake Erie, looked back on what happened here in Toledo 4 or 5 years ago and said, we can never have that happen again. And you could tell that the wheels were already turning, that he had some big plans ahead. And as one of the first priorities out of the gate, this is, I think, a tremendous step forward for the state and a tremendous thing to focus on as your initial year as governor had begun. So I'm glad to say that in this year's state budget, we fully funded the H2Ohio program for the next 2 years. And actually created a mechanism so that any excess revenues over the course of this budget will be captured and spent making sure that we protect and preserve Lake Erie. So I do have some elected officials who are here today that I'd like to introduce because they're all friends of the lake, friends of the environment, and they're all people who've worked on these issues over the years. My President Pro Tem, Senator Bob Peterson, is here. Senator Teresa Gavarone, Senator Teresa Fetter, I believe we're in your district. Is that right, Senator Fetter? Representative Jim Hoops, Representative Haraz Gambari, Representative Lisa Sobecki, Representative DJ Swearingen, and then Representative John Patterson I have not seen, but I know he is on his way. And I'd like to point out that Representative Gambari, Representative Patterson are the sponsors of House Bill 7, which will help fund these types of programs moving into the future, and Representative Mike Sheehy. We have a number of other officials here. We have Lucas County Commissioner Tina Skeldon-Wozniak. We have Wood County Commissioner Doris Herringshaw. We have Toledo City Councilman Larry Sykes, Toledo City Councilwoman Kim Baker, and several mayors from the area. We have the mayor of Sylvania, Craig Stow, the mayor of Perrysburg, Tom Mackin, and the mayor of Waterville, Lori Brody. And these are all people who are here because they care about the future of Lake Erie. They care about our other waterways, and they've all worked in one way or another on making sure that we preserve those for the future. So back to that first meeting with Governor DeWine. We fast forward 9 months and 11 months, I guess, and here we are with funding in the state budget, with Senate Bill 2, House Bill 7, Senator Gavarone's legislation all under consideration. And I think that we see people from a whole host of different parts of the state, different issues that they're focused on, whether it's the Environmental Council, our friends from Agriculture, the Farm Bureau, a number of the commodity groups, all working together for a common goal. So I know they'll join me in saying that we greatly appreciate the governor's leadership, prioritizing our state's water quality, pulling together a strong team, and partnering with the legislature. We're all committed to effective data-driven solutions that produce results. It's a privilege to work alongside Governor DeWine as we do this with the dedicated team of directors who are here today as well. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say here today, Governor. While we've got a great deal of work still in front of us, I know that we're all committed to doing that as a team, to moving forward, to making sure that we protect and preserve the greatest natural asset in the Midwest, Lake Erie. So with that, Governor DeWine.
Well, let me thank Senator Obhoff for his great leadership. That first meeting, this was the first thing he mentioned, and said it was a priority of the Senate. And as we say, we're 11 months, 12 months after that. Here we are. We would not be here without what the General Assembly did. And the General Assembly took unprecedented action. They funded this for 2 years, and that was visionary and forward-looking. It was done in a bipartisan way with the leaders of both parties and the members of the Senate and the members of the House. And so I think that's important. And I think it's important for people to understand that when it comes to Lake Erie, there's no party involved, that both parties, members of both parties have a real passion for making sure that we protect Lake Erie. And beyond that we protect water in the state of Ohio, which is this absolutely magnificent asset that we have in our state. On a more serious note, I do want to say that Senator Obhoff and his family have managed to beat my family 2 times in a row in Fish, Ohio. There will be a rematch next year. We will be back. His daughter Lily, I think, was the leader, at least the last time. And tell Lily we're coming back. So.
We have a 29.5-inch walleye.
Not that anybody remembers the size, right? One of my some of my fondest memories as a kid growing up was fishing with my dad and fishing with my grandfather. It was something they both loved to do, and something I certainly loved to do. Being with both of them was just very, very special. Today, sharing those very same kinds of experiences, fishing and hiking and just being outdoors with our children and our grandchildren is just one of the greatest things that we do. And I think, my love for our lakes, our ponds, our streams, for our Great Lake, Lake Erie, really comes from that experience as a child. It is with that deep appreciation for, and I think the obligation to protect our natural resources that we are here today. The Maumee River behind us to unveil details of our administration's comprehensive water plan known as H2Ohio. Little is more important than having plentiful, clean, safe water. It's something we take for granted, but when we don't have it, we then realize how important it is. But there are communities all across Ohio that are facing very serious threats to their water quality, things such as the harmful algae bloom of Lake Erie and elsewhere, failing septic systems, contaminated drinking water from lead pipes. It is wrong that in 2019, as we move to 2020, that there are communities still in Ohio where citizens must drive miles to get access to clean drinking water. That's wrong. It's wrong that there are some children in Ohio who are being exposed potentially to lead in drinking water because of antiquated piping and fixtures in daycare centers, or that they can't play outside because their backyards are covered in sewage from failing septic systems. That is wrong. And it's wrong that so many of our beautiful lakes, our rivers, our streams are being choked by so much algae and other pollutants that there are times when we can no longer use them for recreation with our families. Simply put, we have a moral obligation to preserve and protect these great natural resources. Quite candidly, our state will never fully flourish as long as we continue to lurch from water crisis to water crisis. H2Ohio is aimed at dealing with that. It is the time for Ohio to seriously invest in a dedicated, holistic water quality plan that has long-lasting solutions, a plan that addresses the causes of the problems and not just the symptoms. My grandfather was a very wise man. When he was well into his 80s, I remember him continuing to plant trees. I thought at the time, he's never going to live to see those trees get very big. But he knew full well that while he wouldn't live to see them grow big and tall, he did it all the same because he wanted those trees to be there for his great-grandkids and generations yet to be born. He planted seeds because he believed in the future. He knew that sometimes you have to invest in things where the return might not be immediate, or it may take years to reap the benefits. But you invest just the same because it is, simply put, the right thing to do. There really is no greater metaphor for what we are trying to achieve with our H2Ohio plan than planting the seeds that today will protect our state's natural bounties tomorrow. Let me quote President Theodore Roosevelt. I think he said it so well. And I quote, "The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, assets which it must turn over to the next generation increased and not impaired in value." That is also certainly true of how our state must behave. Our H2Ohio plan is an investment in targeted solutions to help ensure safe and clean water for all Ohioans. In July, the Ohio General Assembly invested $172 million directly in this plan and other money indirectly in this plan. And I want to again thank them. We would not be here without their vision. It makes all the difference in the world. Our H2Ohio team that we have put together has been carrying out, as a result of that, one of the most comprehensive, data-driven planning processes in our state's history. The plan is based on science. The plan is based on economics. It focuses on directing the resources that we have towards specific practices that have been studied and that we know will make a difference because they've already been proven to work. These are proven practices. We know that they bring the right results. Our plan focuses on reducing phosphorus that causes algae bloom in Lake Erie and elsewhere through the use of best farming practices. Creating new wetlands to reduce excessive nutrients entering lakes and rivers. Addressing water and sewer needs, including failing home sewage treatment systems in disadvantaged communities throughout the state of Ohio. And preventing possible lead contamination in drinking water at daycare centers and in schools. So you might ask, what's different about this plan and what we've done in the past? What sets it apart from previous good faith efforts to deal with this problem? Well, perhaps most importantly, we have put together a very broad coalition of agriculture, research, conservation, environmental interests that truly believes that H2Ohio is the right approach for us to take. Now, I want to take this time to thank them. Many of them are here in this room, or the representatives are here in this room. It was an unprecedented coming together that we have seen over the last few months. Some of the meetings held at our governor's residence, some held other places, a process. But we went through that process, and we have reached an agreement. This is something that we feel is the right approach. And I want to thank all of those groups who were involved in this. As we get more research and data on our efforts, we will continue to work with this coalition to make improvements and be strategic in how we target our resources. Further, we will lay out our goals very clearly. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Agriculture, and the Great Lakes, the Erie Commission, Great Lake Erie Commission, are all working in concert to address this crisis. We will monitor and track progress, and we will use data. We will hold people accountable. We will be transparent. And we will have a sense of urgency. A sense of urgency, making now and knowing that now is the best opportunity to achieve tangible, measurable changes that will have lasting impacts. This is a comprehensive approach to our statewide water problems. It's not just about Lake Erie. It's not just about asking our farmers to reduce phosphorus or change farming practices, although it is about both. And it's not just about increasing the number of wetlands across Ohio. Rather, it's about all of us working together to meet our shared goals. This is a historic public-private partnership. As a state, we are committed to helping farmers adopt the practices that can make a real difference. We will invest in creating more wetlands, and we will help communities improve their water systems and remove decrepit septic systems. So now for the details. And let's start with phosphorus runoff. Let's start with that issue. As you know, phosphorus is a nutrient found in multiple sources, including fertilizer, both manure and commercial fertilizer. For our farmers to do the incredibly important work of putting food on our tables, we understand that they must fertilize their crops. But as a state, we simply have not done a good enough job helping them reduce phosphorus runoff from fertilizer, which often ends up draining from farm fields in northwest Ohio into the Maumee River watershed and then ultimately into Lake Erie. This chart shows the size of the Maumee River watershed. It covers more than a dozen northwest Ohio counties. So even though there may be only a small amount of phosphorus runoff per acre, if you multiply that by the millions of acres of Ohio farmland draining into Lake Erie, it certainly adds up. And that's what can lead to harmful algae blooms that can threaten drinking water and impact the health of both people and animals. This chart shows the millions of pounds of phosphorus that flowed from the Maumee River watershed into Lake Erie from 2014 to 2018. And as you can see, the results have not been what we wanted. In 2014, the phosphorus that flowed into Lake Erie from the Maumee River watershed totaled 2.3 million pounds. By the spring of 2018, the number was at 2.4 million. You can see Ohio's past efforts to reduce phosphorus runoff, although certainly well-intended, have not worked. Now, not all phosphorus comes from farms, but most does. Studies show that nutrient runoff from agriculture accounts for the majority of the phosphorus load in the Maumee River watershed. And so I've talked with a number of farmers, as well as groups representing farmers. And when I talk to farmers, guess what? They don't like algae blooms either. Farmers want to do all that they can to reduce nutrient runoff, but they can't do it on their own. Ohio has supported many programs to help farmers reduce nutrient loss over the years, but we have not done enough, nor have previous plans been focused enough on reducing phosphorus runoff from agriculture. Runoff from agriculture is the primary reason for the algae blooms, yet Ohio has directed only a fraction of its past spending to the root cause of the problem. The rest of the money has gone to other projects related to drinking water and wastewater improvement. Very, very important things. And please don't understand, these projects were important and they needed to be done, but they did not reduce the Lake Erie algae blooms. So in contrast to previous efforts, H2Ohio will invest significantly in helping farmers reduce agricultural phosphorus runoff. There are many methods for reducing phosphorus loading, but not all of them provide the same return for taxpayers' dollars that we will be spending. Our H2Ohio team considered more than 100 phosphorus reduction practices, and we narrowed them down to around 30, with the best potential, those 30 having the best potential to reduce the most phosphorus at the lowest cost. Based on these exhaustive efforts, the team then narrowed the practices down even further, identifying the 10 most cost-effective things that could be done, the most cost-effective practices. These are the 10 best practices that have been identified. These are the practices that have been identified as we narrow that from 100 down to 30, down to 10. The most bang for the buck. Our H2Ohio team, our program, will help farmers implement them. We're going to focus on the Maumee River watershed first, but ultimately we intend to bring H2Ohio plan to the rest of the state. Some of these practices help farmers with better fertilizer management. Others create natural and physical barriers to keep phosphorus in the soil. It is through widespread adoption of these 10 practices that we expect to see significant reductions in phosphorus levels over time. Now, I'll get into more detail about these 10 practices in a moment. But I want to stress something first. The whole process of studying various nutrient reduction methods, as well as our detailed implementation process and data tracking plan, are really what make H2Ohio so different from what we have done in the past. We believe this difference will make all the difference when it comes to Ohio's water. We looked hard at what has and has not worked to reduce phosphorus in the western Lake Erie Basin and elsewhere. We tapped into the latest academic and field research. We developed detailed models to estimate the most cost-efficient path to give us the most results. And we consulted, and we collaborated with a number of different groups, many of which are shown right here, to understand their perspective and to hear what ideas they have. We've received input and feedback from farmers, farmer groups, environmental organizations, universities, soil and water conservation districts, residents, businesses, federal agencies, and of course our own state agencies. Now, in the past, our own state agencies, the Ohio Department of Agriculture, EPA, ODNR, and the Lake Erie Commission, all seem to work independently to address phosphorus levels. With H2Ohio, these agencies will all work together to target the most important opportunities and to make sure our projects complement each other. Let me now ask Dorothy Polanda, Lori Stevenson, Mary Mertz, and Joy Molinex to please stand. And these are directors. I jokingly told them the other day, look, if it doesn't work, it's all on you guys. There are directors of Agriculture, EPA, ODNR, and the Lake Erie Commission, and they are leading this charge. I want to thank them for their great work in formulating this plan and for all the efforts that are going forward in the future to implement it and to make sure it works. We also realize that the state of Ohio cannot fix this problem alone, and so I want to thank our partners, such as the Ohio Agricultural Conservation Initiative, our soil and water conservation districts, agriculture extension agents, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, agribusinesses, and others for their commitment to solving the problem of nutrient runoff. They are going to be very much involved in implementing this. So it truly is a public-private partnership, and it is a state and local partnership. Another unique aspect of H2Ohio is that we have engaged the CEOs of some of the largest agribusinesses around the country. Land of Lakes, Nutrien, Anderson's, to name three. They have all voiced their support for our plan. Agribusiness in Ohio have a great deal of expertise in developing detailed plans that help farmers keep their fields in good condition while minimizing losses when soil erodes and nutrients wash off the fields. And frankly, these are companies that farmers rely on and look to. And so having their buy-in for this plan was also very important. As I said, I talked to a number of those CEOs directly. These businesses are trusted partners in the agriculture community. They have a unique relationship with farmers who often turn to them for advice on how to support the investments they've made in their farm fields, how to best fertilize, how to keep their soil healthy. There are many agribusinesses that work with farmers to apply the right fertilizer at the right time, in the right place, and at the right rate. The fact that these agribusinesses have all agreed to be part of the phosphorus reduction solution, I think, is a really big deal, and I thank them. They've agreed to support H2Ohio and promote our program to their customers to help increase the number of acres enrolled in best practices. Further, we will provide an economic incentive to farmers to follow these best practices. We will do this through a certification process, whereby farmers will only be eligible for this money if they follow a nutrient management plan. Certification is an old term used in agriculture many, many years. When my family was in the seed business, we grew certified seed for a while. So the concept of certifying that what you're certifying is best practices and having this done by an independent group is something that is well known to agriculture. There are 10 best practices for nutrient management that are part of our H2Ohio plan. And we'll start with number 1. Soil testing and nutrient management planning. This gives farmers scientific information about their fields to help them know where to place fertilizer, when, and how much. Number 2, variable rate fertilization. Our H2Ohio plan will help farmers employ variable rate fertilization practices which use precision agricultural tools to apply specific fertilizer levels based on the need of each subacre. This process saves money on fertilizers since farmers only use exactly what they need and don't suffer a risk of losing yield with less fertilizer being applied. And with that less fertilizer being applied, nutrient runoff, of course, will in fact decline. It is truly a win-win. Number 3, subsurface nutrient application. Here we'll help farmers apply fertilizer below the surface. When fertilizer is underground, phosphorus is less likely to run off into the water. Number 4, manure incorporation. Research shows that manure accounts for about 20% of the phosphorus applied on farms in the Maumee River watershed. H2Ohio will invest in practices to help mix manure into the soil to keep it in place to prevent runoff. Number 5, crop rotation. Conservation crop rotation. Certain crops can actually reduce erosion and enrich the soil, so adding them into the farmer's crop rotation will reduce runoff and decrease the need for fertilizer. We will give farmers resources to help them do this. Cover crops. H2Ohio will help farmers plant cover crops, which are crops planted after the main harvest to reduce erosion, hold nutrients in the soil, and improve soil health, all of which, again, means less need for fertilizer. Number 7, drainage water management. H2Ohio will provide funds to farmers to build gates at the end of field drainage systems to control when phosphorus runoff is released into the watershed. By slowing the time it takes for runoff to get into the watershed, phosphorus will have more time to settle back into the soil. That means less will drain into the Maumee River watershed and then into Lake Erie once the gate is lifted. Number 8, two-stage ditch construction. H2Ohio will implement two-stage ditch construction, which creates modified drainage ditches with benches on the side to serve as floodplains in the channel. This slows water flow and, again, allows the phosphorus to settle back into the land. Edge of field buffers. We will help farmers plant edge of field buffers because when trees or shrubs are planted along the fields in the right place, they hold on to the nutrients and prevent them from escaping into the watershed. And finally, number 10, wetlands. Along the same lines as edge of field buffers, we will also be developing new wetlands in strategic targeted areas throughout the western Lake Erie Basin and elsewhere. Research over the years has shown that wetland vegetation takes up phosphorus, and the soils in these wetlands can absorb it as well. Wetlands slow down the movement of water, offer a natural filtering process, and will help us achieve our goals by allowing the sediment to settle, preventing the further movement of contaminated matter. Because wetlands can do so much more for our water than just reduce phosphorus, I will come back to this topic in a moment. But first, I want to talk briefly about how we can support our farmers and how we can quickly do this. Now, let me make it clear. Of the strategies that we just outlined, we do not expect all of our farmers to implement all of these practices. For now, we will not be mandating the use of these H2O best practices. We don't believe we will have to, because we believe our strategy will lead to significant changes within the confines of our current law today. We do, though, need all farmers to participate at some level, because they really are key to our progress. At the same time, they have an amazing opportunity to help shape the future of this state. One of our goals with H2Ohio is to ultimately save farmers money and increase their profits. Healthier soil will lead to higher yields, and less fertilizer will mean farmers will spend less on that input. But returns won't be immediate, and we know that, which is why H2Ohio will help with the initial investment to cover startup costs. And that's why the money from the General Assembly is so very important. Our plan is aggressive, and we must move quickly. We have completed the H2O plan, and now we're starting to localize by developing specific reduction targets for each county in the Maumee River watershed. By creating localized goals, we'll create a greater sense of accountability, as each community and each farmer will have a stake in his or her own success. We also develop individualized nutrient management plans farm by farm, because the best practices that work on one farm might not make an impact on another. We have to be strategic about this. To do this work on the local level, we are training our partners in our county soil and water conservation district offices. And again, I want to congratulate them. They have been at the forefront of trying to preserve our soil, good farming practices for many, many years. And we're going to utilize them to achieve this. We're going to ask them to lead the local efforts and help farmers enroll in our H2Ohio programs. And I appreciate their willingness to take on this effort. We are confident that they'll use their expertise to efficiently implement the H2Ohio programs. As we continue to move forward, extension agents, the Farm Bureau, agribusiness, and others will also help farmers access H2Ohio funding so that they can start using best practices for the spring 2020 planting. Finally, we will evaluate our progress against clear and measurable metrics to track H2Ohio's impact. We'll be transparent with what we find. We are currently developing an electronic reporting system for the public where anyone will be able to go online and track the progress that is being made, which we think is very, very important. That really is our phosphorus reduction plan in a nutshell. Again, this process will focus on Lake Erie right now. But ultimately, we intend to take this across the state of Ohio and to reach farmers in other areas of the state, because algae blooms are happening on the Ohio River. They're happening on some of our inland lakes as well. But dealing with the algae blooms are only one part of our water quality plan. Let me turn to wetlands. As I mentioned, wetlands are a large part of our H2Ohio plan, and we're going to start building wetlands not just in the Maumee River watershed, but also in other key areas of Ohio. We have successful programs now, and they demonstrate solid results. For example, we have a wetlands research center that's doing great things at Old Women's Creek in Erie County. We have wetlands at Grand Lake St. Mary's in Mercer and Auglaize counties. They are showing there a significant reduction in phosphorus, and they are making a real impact. By adding more wetlands in Ohio, we will reduce phosphorus levels in our lakes and rivers. But also, we will do other things. We will reduce excess nitrogen levels in our water and store carbons. And we will add critical habitat that promotes a diverse array of wildlife. We'll help manage periodic flooding, and they will also offer additional recreation opportunities from hunting and fishing to hiking and simply wildlife viewing. We're very excited about those possibilities. These other benefits are invaluable, and best of all, wetlands can be permanent. While they will need to be monitored and they'll need certainly to be managed, these natural solutions are long-lived and could be primarily self-sustaining once that they are in fact established. So I'm very excited about what we can do in this area, and I know ODNR Director Mary Mertz will be announcing more details on specific projects in the coming months. So that's coming up. Finally, while the Ohio EPA will be monitoring phosphorus loading in Lake Erie and the Ohio River as well, and will be evaluating new technology that can contribute to these efforts, the department will primarily focus its H2Ohio efforts outside of the Maumee River watershed to help ensure clean, safe water for all Ohioans. It's simply unbelievable to me when we think about it in 2019 that there are areas in Ohio where people today still don't have access to good quality drinking water or sewer systems. That's wrong. We have to do something about it. The director is ready to go, right, Director? Ready to go. She's already started. So. In addition, schools and daycare centers in Ohio and across the nation still face potential lead exposure in drinking water from old fixtures and lead pipes. Ohio's communities rely on clean drinking water and wastewater infrastructure to protect public health, provide for a high quality of life, and enable economic vitality. H2Ohio is going to help these communities. Here in Ohio, drinking water and wastewater infrastructure, the pipes, the pumps, tanks, treatment plants themselves are all locally owned and operated. This is a tremendous responsibility for the local governmental units, and it can be an economic challenge for them. Nationally, the cost for water and wastewater services continues to climb because operation and maintenance expenses continue to increase. Communities are taking on more debt to keep up with the regulations and aging infrastructure. And I know the members of the General Assembly here have heard from their local communities about this. As a result, financial assistance, particularly to small and disadvantaged communities, is critically important, and that's where we'll start. Under the direction of the Ohio EPA, H2Ohio will be funding infrastructure projects in disadvantaged communities to help ensure they have safe drinking water and sewer services. H2Ohio will also help replace hundreds of failing home sewage treatment systems in low-income households. According to an Ohio Department of Health study, an estimated 31% of existing home sewage treatment systems could be failing. When these systems fail, raw sewage can release onto the homeowner's property or drain into rivers, streams, or lakes. This creates, obviously, serious water quality issues and public health concerns for those who come into contact with this. Low-income households across Ohio have a hard time replacing these systems on their own, so H2Ohio will provide funds to help them take care of the problem. Additionally, through a combination of state and federal funds, H2Ohio will be assessing lead exposure in daycare centers and schools in high-risk areas of Ohio. This effort will help communities who otherwise wouldn't have the resources to replace lead pipes and fixtures and to save these children from lead poisoning. Ohio EPA Director Lori Stevenson will be making a few announcements in the upcoming weeks with more specifics about these upcoming infrastructure septic systems, work on the systems, and lead pipe projects. So more to come from the Director. Ohio's water problems took many years to develop. It certainly is going to take time for us to make this recovery. So it's very important that we remain realistic as we begin to measure that progress. Algae blooms will not immediately disappear. We know that. And in fact, we may actually even see phosphorus levels rise initially because of irregular rainy seasons. Because of an irregular rainy season, we also have residue that's already there. But even if all this happens, it won't mean that we are not making progress. We have scientific evidence that all the best practices that we are implementing through H2Ohio, the 10 that I've talked about, will reduce nutrient runoff. If we significantly increase their use, these best practices, over time, we will reduce the phosphorus flowing into the Maumee River watershed that in turn directly leads to algae blooms in Lake Erie. And that is what we'll be measuring, the number of acres using best practices, because that's where it all starts. Let me again thank the General Assembly. I'm very grateful for the money that they have provided in the recent biennium budget. They stepped up, they did it. We're going to need their future support as we move forward in the years ahead. We're all in this together for this process to continue to work. ODNR Director Mertz shared with me something recently. She found an old faded folder. She was looking at a 1949 annual report for ODNR. Now, I can't tell you why she was looking at a 1949 ODNR report. Sleepless, right? Okay. It was from 1949, the first year of ODNR's existence. The first part of the report is about water resources. And here's a quote. The indispensable need for water demands extraordinary efforts for its conservation. Unlike other minerals, water, as it occurs in Ohio, receives annual replenishment and cannot be saved by non-use. Conservation of water in Ohio will rather be by obtaining the maximum beneficial use of water perennially and guarding those resources from polluting matters which render water unfit for use. 70 years later, and our fight for water quality is just as important and just as imperative as it was in 1949. I want to thank everyone in the room, again, who's been working on H2Ohio. And as I look around the room, I think virtually everybody has been involved in one way or the other. While long-term quality improvements are certainly complex, there's no doubt about that, we have an historic public-private partnership put together with a coalition of agriculture groups and conservation groups that is really unprecedented and takes a holistic approach. A world-class action plan is what this really is, with solutions that are long-term, cost-effective, and permanent. I'd like to conclude with a line from what is known as the prayer of Oscar Romero, and I quote, "We plant the seeds that one day will grow, because we are prophets of a future not of our own." We must get this right, but I am confident we can get it right by working together, all of us, and remaining steadfast in our commitment to healthy and abundant natural resources now and well into our future. Thank you all very much.